In here. There we go. Um, Guys, we're gonna do the typical think tank fire hose today, if that's cool. One of the things that whether you're new to the call or you've been here a long time that we kind of try to do, and if you think it's like, wow, we're doing a lot, it's actually intentional, good, bad, or otherwise. We always approach these calls sort of like, okay, how much how much information can we give because your time is so valuable within a 60-minute framework, also understanding that everybody kind of is coming at things or is having unique challenges or unique things that they're dealing with. And so we always try to make sure that it's not so topically narrow that it's not there isn't at least a segment of it that you can take and actually implement. So we may be together for 60 minutes. There may be 2 minutes of it that you go, man, that was worth my 60-minute commitment. That would be our hope. Hopefully all 60 minutes are helpful, but we recognize that sometimes it may not necessarily work that way. As well, Snod is in the call. Nate is here from our team. I think that's it from our team today, and they're gonna be managing. They're gonna interrupt me as well, but they're gonna be in the chat. So part of what we want to do is number one, invite you to freely unmute and interject yourself if you'd like to, but also you utilize the chat. As Matt Grubb said, Debbie is the best. So there you go. So already Debbie's getting kudos, but use the chat. It'll be really helpful if you don't feel like you want to unmute and do that. That would be completely awesome. All right, let me see if I can do this, guys. Let me see if I can actually. I'm going to pin myself today. There we go. Let me see if I can actually get us over to the deck that we have for today and see if we can't make that happen. Little share screen. Talk amongst yourselves for just a second. All right, cool. All right. You guys see that all right? Everybody see that all right? There it is. Maybe, maybe not. I'm struggling.
We can.
There we go. Can you guys see that okay?
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Let's jump in and let's see if we can't change the world today a little bit. Uh, One of the things that is pretty important to us is that uh, we are topically where you guys need to be, and part of what we've been hearing a lot are some real helps that might help you guys around these next two topics that we want to do. So we're going to do about 20 minutes on what we're calling the challenge of alignment. If you get any of our Monday fuel on Monday morning, you saw some of this over the last couple of weeks. We're gonna talk about this just a little bit today, and then we're gonna do a little bit of Easter prep. I know that you guys are in it already, or I would assume you're at least somewhat in it today. And so we thought we would take some of the time and actually try to help you maybe pull together some thoughts and or actually reapproach your team and be able to go, okay, here's where we're at, and here's maybe some things we haven't been thinking about. And we're going to hit it from a little bit. I know there's webinars all over the place that you can be a part of and jump in on, but we're going to hit it from a little different angle today, in that we're going to hit it from one of our Growmentum core values is that we would be spirit led and strategically aware. And so when we get to the Easter stuff, we're going to jump into that and make sure that it's good. I know that alignment is pretty cliche when it comes to leadership. Like, it's one of those things that you probably see everywhere, and everybody talks about alignment all the time and da 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 da. We've talked about the book Boys in the Boat on this call in the past, so I won't revisit that. But if you haven't jumped into that book, I would encourage you to grab it. It's a great leadership book, but also a great story. And the reason we kind of always prep this conversation around alignment with the boys in the boat thing is because it's about rowing, but it has nothing. But it has everything to do with leadership, because the book itself talks about the idea of how do you get 8 people that are all rowing in the same direction to the same destination, trying to accomplish the same objective, to all be on the same page. And if one of the nine individuals is not on the same page, it's catalytic and catastrophic for the boat, for the objective, etc. And so that creates a concept for us in leadership as we lead our churches and our organizations around how do we get our team continually aligned. One of the things that you guys need to know is true is that alignment as a concept organizationally is extremely delicate. It decays really quickly, and it's something that you have to have a rhythm of constantly checking in on. For example, some of you have already had your weekly check-ins or your staff meetings already at the first of this week, and you walked out of there and you were hopefully under the impression our team is on the same page. And I'm sure you were. I'm sure you did a great job. But the reality is alignment begins to decay quickly, and it begins to also decay immediately. So your youth guy came in the room, or your worship gal came in the room, and you had a great conversation directionally resetting, and they walked out of the room and they began to execute. And as they began to execute, if this is the goal, destination, and this is where you are, and you felt like you did an incredible job of really illuminating that. Look, this is not on the slide deck. This is just Lee on the Zoom screen. The reality is you think it's going to go like directly straight line to that destination. The reality is it's going to look more like this, right? It's going to do this because they're going to go off, and not in a divisive way. That's another conversation, but they're going to go off and they're going to do their thing. And as they execute, they're going to slowly get a little bit offline with where you want them to go. That's why a regular rhythm of syncing up, of working on it, is so important for our teams, because really alignment that's healthy advances towards the destination, but it looks in even healthy organizations a lot more like, look at Lee on the screen, a lot more like this. It's constantly pulling the team together. So if that frustrates you, I apologize, but part of your role that you carry is to constantly be that person that's realigning. What we don't want, guys, is this. Some of us have been really good at having lots of alignment conversations, but we really either haven't moved the ball or we haven't really set the goal. So we just spend all of our time aligning, or maybe you've been on teams where that's true. We also don't want this, obviously. So alignment is something that is a constant role, especially at the seat that you guys sit in the organization, in the church that you lead. Jeff, can you pause just a second and tell me a little bit about in your current situation? It's not, I'll just put you on the spot, but what's the greatest alignment challenge that you've walked into over the last year or two in your XP role?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think in the same sense we always talk about what alignment we think it looks like versus what it does. I think the reality is creating the rhythm in meetings, which I think if we're really honest as executive level leaders, whether lead, executive, pastor, regardless of what we don't have systems and structures that bring us back into alignment. And so do our meeting structures actually help bring us back into alignment? Are we having the right agenda items? Are we having the right topics? So for me, like that was the biggest thing that we needed to do when I stepped into Crosspoint here 15 months ago, is I recognized that we didn't have the touch points in the meetings that were going on to make sure that we could go back into alignment. In other words, hey, like, are we on the same page with this? Here's where we want to be at in 10 years. Here's where we want to be at in 3 years. And are we actually accomplishing that, or are we just getting off course? So a lot of our meeting structures aren't really setting ourselves up for success. And so that's one of the things. And then we also, I think a lot of organizations, we organize meetings all over the place rather than starting at the 30,000 foot level and then working down onto the weekly treadmill of Sundays or big Sundays or your different invite weekends. The reality is you got to start at that 30,000 foot level and break it down into the order in which you're like actually executing that. I think Working Genius is a really big helpful tool in terms of organizing your meeting structure to execute that as well.
I love what you just said there, and I put it in the chat. It wasn't part of what I thought we were going to talk about, but it's the idea of even as you do those touch points on that alignment line that I was drawing on the screen, does your agenda in those touch points, whether it be staff meetings, team one-on-ones, does it actually promote alignment? Right? In our concepts, we always talk about work on it, work in it. Both of those things need to be operating in alignment, but typically the work on it is where alignment is probably clarified or can be diagnosed a little bit. So if your agenda is constantly, who left the back door open, who needs more storage, who's showing up, why are we setting up chairs, why did, who did, if it's weedy or in it all the time, my gut would tell me you may struggle to actually, you may feel a level of struggle to get alignment.
Well, and two last things, Lee. I think your slides aren't updating, at least for some of us. I don't know
I
why. So
haven't updated any. I'm
okay,
good
got it. Just
stuff.
making sure.
So
The
yeah, that's
second thing
good.
is it's same thing with
I
Covey's
was just
idea.
drawing in the air.
Oh, got it. Okay. If think about meetings as like Stephen Covey's rocks, put your big
Yep.
items in your meeting agenda first, and then get to all of those other tasks. I think that that's a helpful, like, just mental note of like, oh, I probably should put those in first.
Right. And that your team will pull you into the other stuff. So that's pretty important for you guys to be aware of. The other reality of alignment is that as your organization gets larger, this, I'm looking at guys on the call that have, that have started to scale. It's going to be just reality is it's going to be more challenging, and you've kind of signed up for that. And so that's part of what we need to assess all the time. Nate, you want to talk a little bit about that from your perspective as you've led teams through alignment and maybe working with some teams now on that?
I mean, I'll just echo, I think, everything that you guys are saying. I mean, I think we assume that everyone's going to lead the way that we lead and that,
Mhm.
we're in step with each other. But I think the reality is, like you said, I mean, it's all best intention, well intentioned, but they're going to start becoming misaligned. And if we don't have those rhythms to bring them back together, we're going to wake up one day and go like, why the heck are you way over there? I thought we were heading this direction. And so I think we've
Right.
just got to, even if it's a 15-minute touch base meeting, like it doesn't have to be a long drawn out meeting. It's, hey, let's figure out where we're at. Let's report out and make sure that we're aligned and keep moving. So
Love it. Okay, cool. Anybody else want to speak to that or ask questions around it? We're going to go through these gauges here. So we are going to do that. But thoughts? I'm trying to use the 10-second rule. Everybody tells me I'm really bad at it. So I'm trying to sit here and I'm trying to be a good small group leader. I'm hating my life right now as I sit here though. So just to be clear.
Don't make a bad
Awesome.
small group moment.
I know we're really having it. Let me go through these. So, and I was going to call on Becker, but it's a little sensitive to call on Becker right now. So I'm going to leave Becker alone for a minute. And not he might hijack our entire call if I called on him. So he didn't even unmute. He's like, fair enough. Let me walk you through these. Okay, so there's two things that I want to walk you through before we pivot to Easter. I want to walk you through these gauges. And to be frank with you guys and candid, which is one of them, by the way, these are fresh. Okay, so we are working through these as we speak. So in some ways, this is kind of beta, but I was with a team in San Francisco yesterday, and we spent about an hour kind of running these gauges. So really, I just want you guys to think of these gauges as a constant tool for you, right? And they're a constant tool towards alignment that you can use. We're actually going to give you like a resource that you can download and kind of ask the right questions around alignment. There's 6 of them. Now, to be fair, these are really designed for you to gauge organizational alignment. There's a couple things that are not going to necessarily are not going to blatantly show up on here. For example, if someone on your team is potentially having a character issue or a moral ethical issue, that may not necessarily show up, even though it would be out of alignment with the organization. That would be a different conversation than what we're talking about. We're talking about are we pursuing the same things and are we on the same page? All right. So there's somebody's not muted, but that's okay. So there's 6 of them. Let me go through them and you guys we can talk about them, right? So here they are. You like my little graphics? Slow clap. Come on. There it is. All right. We're going to
Your
give you all of
screen,
this.
please.
There it is.
It
Whoever it
indicates
is
you're on
not
mute.
muted is letting us hear
Hey,
their
Lee,
conversation. We really appreciate it. Yes, please.
can you
Nate?
like, is there a way for you to maximize that screen? It's really small on everyone's
Okay, hold
Yeah,
on.
screen.
here.
How's that? Better? No? Still not
Better.
good?
Thank you.
Better?
Yep.
All right, because I can change it. I'm trying to make sure that you guys can see me and see who's ever talking, but also see
Yep, it's good now.
is that better? Thank you, Nate. I
Yep.
appreciate you.
I think I
We are in
fixed the
alignment.
background
We are
noise.
so in alignment. It's crazy.
Yeah, the background noise is fixed too.
Thank you. So let's walk through these. So number one is really around this idea of candor. Let's talk about that. So we would ask the question, as you look at your team currently as they are positioned, all of their roles, not sure how wide or how deep you want to go, but starting even at the top of the organization, one of the gauges of that would help us determine are we on the same page, are we moving in the same direction, might not be the first one you would think about, but you have to start asking the question, how candid are we in our conversations with each other and around the challenges of our organization? The term we use a lot, if you guys have been around our team, is this idea of how comfortable are we sharing the last 10% of truth? Now, caveat, we're not talking about blowing people up, being inappropriate. We're talking about within healthy ways that we converse, within healthy conversations, within the framework that respects and appreciates the people around us. That is a key element. If you've ever read Radical Candor, it's a great resource if your team is struggling with this. But basically, when you think about the last 10%, think about it as, what are the things that get said when you take a bathroom break from a meeting and you go into the restroom and you're having a conversation? What are the things that happen after the meeting in the hallway where someone says, we were in the meeting with Jeremy Peterson and Jeremy said this, and I didn't agree with that, and I think he was off base on that, and I really wanted to say this. If you're sensing a lot of those conversations, what you're really experiencing there is what we would call you're lacking the last 10%. And unfortunately, there can be a lot of reasons why that's true. But if that gauge is moving towards red, I would start to ask the question, what action do we need to take around that? If you're starting to feel that, if you're the person that's struggling with sharing the last 10%, then you're also probably a part of the challenge of how do we stay aligned. Number one, that's candor. Okay. I'm going to rattle through these if that's fair, and then we can open it up for convo. Number two is a little bit different as well. It's callousness. Okay, this is based on the idea is your team still sensitive? Are they still passionate around the mission? There's this passage in Mark chapter 6 where the disciples have been out on Jesus sends them out to do ministry, and they come back all pumped, and then they actually feed the 5,000, and all of that happens. And then they're out on the lake just a few minutes later, and a few hours later, Jesus comes walking on the water. And it says in the passage, that their hearts are hard. And the Greek word there is the Greek word for callousness. Doesn't mean rebellious. It doesn't mean rogue. Doesn't mean sinful. It means they lacked sensitivity, that they had stopped seeing. And so we use the term as well. I think it came from the Pope, Andy Stanley, where he says time in erodes awareness of. And I think that's true of us, right? And so we would invite you to gauge your team's level of callousness and level of passion and sensitivity around the mission that you're specifically on. And I think you have to be really guiding it, not just on the holistic, like Matthew 28, Great Commission, but I also think you have to be looking at it through the lens of this last one on this slide, which is the lens of, do they have clarity? Does your team understand your unique, distinct vision, your unique, distinct view, right? Like the nearer view of what we're trying to accomplish, and what are our focuses right now as an organization that are our highest priority. I would also throw the word values in there as well, because each of you on this call, your church should have some unique, distinct values. And so the clarity gauge is really around how much does our team, how much clarity do they have around our vision, view, values, and focuses. Because if they don't have clarity, the likelihood of them being misaligned and it not even being their fault is huge. It's like when I put my little dot up here, my little kindergarten slide deck right here. If they don't know where we're trying to head, then of course they're going to be misaligned. And that's on you guys. That's on us as the primary leaders to set that course. So candor, callousness, clarity. Let's pause and talk about these three before I advance. Anything? Comments, questions, thoughts? I'd love to hear some of you guys comment a little bit on how the heck you actually can monitor this, because I actually don't know for sure. How do we monitor these things?
Lee, I have a question.
Yes, Chris
How
Hall.
have you, and maybe other people can weigh in, like, how do you navigate the candor conversation when you have people that can't handle that, right? They're key team members, their insecurities, and that kind of stuff get in the way of candor on a regular basis. What do you do in those situations? How do you handle a team when clearly there's someone that struggles with receiving candor in that last 10%?
I'll let somebody else jump in if they've been navigating it potentially. Nate?
Something I'll throw in just, and actually Michelle, who's on the call, is doing this with her team right now. I think pairing this like with thanks for the feedback is a great resource. I think that's a great way to start the conversations of how do we receive feedback, how are we giving it, and then tying in radical candor with it. But I think it really ends up being a feedback issue for me.
Well, and Chris, one of the things I'll compliment Nate on, on Culture Index is an enterpriser. He's also got the challenger, trait in him. But Nate can say something really truthful, but he says it with such a way of love and care that you almost like walk out of the meeting saying like, thank you for giving me the hard feedback. And so I think that balance of saying truthful things that help build the person up with that love and care, always pairing those is the way to do that. I think beyond that, Chris, I think this is true for all of us. We can't carry people's insecurity or, and I mean this nicely, like immaturity that they can't handle true comments. We've got to help develop our people, and if that's the first step towards that direction, it's the right thing. I think Nate is just a perfect example of who executes that with success.
Hey, Lee.
Yeah. Go, Chris.
Yeah,
Christopher, go.
yeah. I think this is an incredible conversation, and I'm intrigued that I haven't heard the conversation around trust or the idea of trust yet. Because it feels like to me a basis of a lot of this is how well have we built trust,
Yep.
and in many ways, are we assuming trust, right? And I
Right.
found at least for some of the teams that I've been on and or lead, I think there's a level of mistake or misstep that we make where we assume that trust is there when it really takes just some time to build trust, right? It takes time to, and I mean authentic trust. And I think the previous slide before you changed those three C's. I mean, I think it's that candor, that callousness, that clarity, that has to be dripped over time because those are the things that build trust.
Yeah, it's interesting too. The irony of it, Chris Hall, is I was thinking you can't be candid. You're struggling to be candid about their lack of candor, right? Their inability to handle it. You need to be candid with them that they're struggling with candor, right? It is interesting. Yeah, it's a feedback loop. I wish that I could just give you an easy answer, right? But part of it is, I think one of the things I always used to wrestle with is the idea is that sometimes the rest of our team is in being impacted by our inability to actually manage it. For example, Chris, I'll use you as an example. The rest of the team probably notices that person's inability to process candor as well, right? And so sometimes, if nothing else, we have to be motivated by our leadership is now being brought into a degree of question because of our inability to lead through this difficult conversation. Does that make sense? That's not really a solution, but it's kind of like, hey, if I don't handle this, it's actually starting to reflect more on me than it's actually reflecting on them, because the rest of the team is going, why doesn't Chris deal with this, right? And why does he do that? So
Lee, one more thing. I'll just and this I'm not an expert at this in any way, shape, or form, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts and even others about how this is impacted generationally. because I think there's different ways that different
Mm.
generations can approach this.
I think what I've seen in this season's ideas, I've done some of that teaching, it is that I think that there's a sense where and I just think we have to be aware of it as leaders, that there's a cultural tone we have to set that we give feedback. Right. And I think Christopher actually alluded, right? Like if the culture is a culture of we are very open, we give feedback. I receive feedback as the primary leader. Because if you're not open to candor, but you expect everybody else to have it, that's problematic, right? So it's a culture of feedback. I think that's the part that really can set it. And then generationally, I think one of the challenges that you guys need to work through is I think the younger generation actually probably our younger leaders, they desire feedback until you give it to them. And so I think that's the challenge, right? Is they want to be mentored and coached, but there's a natural like, ooh, that hurts offense that's there. I don't want to be stereotypical across the board, but I think that's typically there. I dealt with a few leaders who were frustrated with that. And so I think we have to coach them towards it and wanting it to be there. I only forwarded the slides because Christopher kind of teed me up for the next one when he was talking about trust and this idea that the final three deal with conflict, which is very closely related to, and all of these probably interplay with candor, right? Because Chris, there's probably part of what you brought up a moment ago that's also a little conflict averse, because we think that candor always produces conflict. I don't believe that's true, but we sometimes operate that way, that's true. So how are you doing with tension that's being addressed on your team? Because if there's a lot of tension, it's probably redlining around we're not in alignment. Commitment is really like, what are the areas of ownership and action that we have expectations around? And this is where I would put things, and this might be a little candid for the call, but where you're dealing with expectations of team members. Frankly, I'll say the one that comes up all the time is, how generous are they? How much are they participating in giving and tithing and all that? What's that expectation? You're like, Lee, I don't know if that fits under this. I actually think it does to some extent, right? Because they're a level of investment. It's also a character issue, but their level of investment, what they're doing and stewarding their finances and contributing to the organization is really a buy-in and ownership conversation. Are their actions reflecting the level of buy-in? Because if you have team members who maybe are contributing big, but from a resource giving point, they are not, if you know that they are not, that's probably at least a candid conversation you need to have around what their level of ownership is if their stewardship is not matching what your expectation would be for someone in their role in the organization. And the last one's chemistry, which is what Christopher alluded to earlier, right? So those ideas of like, how's the team's energy? Goes way beyond just simply trust, but how's the team's energy? How are those things? And what's our trust factor? Again, as I'm reading these, I'm like, these are all interrelated, you guys. Because candor builds trust. No, navigating the tension of conflict builds trust and chemistry, right? Shows levels of commitment across the board. So those are the six. I don't have them all on one slide because I'm a loser. So I'm just going to keep scrolling back and forth, left and right. So there you go. Feedback or comments. It's open air for a few minutes.
On the conflict, hard conversations, all those things. One of the things I think we could point to as leaders, Book of Proverbs, wise, foolish, evil. Wise leaders invite feedback, foolish people ignore it, evil people push it. And so, helping people, if our goal is to be more like Christ and to follow the word of God, we want to be wise leaders and invite feedback. That can help begin to train our leaders up on that so that we can have the hard conversations. But that's just a reminder there as well.
Others jump in.
Yeah,
Brian Becker, feel free to jump in if you're so entailed.
I just got something, Lee.
Yes.
I forget who the gentleman was who asked the question a second ago, like what do you do with people who don't
Oh, Chris.
handle
Yeah.
it?
Go, Max. Yep.
I think like it's a leadership development thing for that person, and you have to they have to have a good understanding of like why it's important, why candor, callousness, clarity, conflict, why all these things are important, and the importance is alignment. So it's just like it's not just I just want you to be open and honest and be able to take feedback in this meeting so that everything goes well in this meeting. It's like no, because it helps us that helps us reach our goal. So like yeah, there are people who uh need to be coached up in this area, being able to receive feedback, but like the way that you coach them up is to say when you get better at receiving this feedback, I'm going to be able to give it and we're going to be able to accomplish our mission together more effectively.
Yeah, that's
I think
good.
that's a good way to move that
Alignment to
conversation
mission.
forward.
Yeah, good, Max.
I might actually use the last 10%. If you're on this call and you need to bring this up culturally across the board, because I think I would encourage you even to, and we'll just keep picking on Hall because he unmuted, but across the board, like if you're like, man, my team needs to raise the bar of candor, I would just bring it up as a last 10% concept. We've kind of thrown it to you. So if you're not using that language or you need to revisit it, just go into your team meeting and go, hey guys, I want us to do a gauge check on this last 10%, how we're doing, without it being pointed at some individual. So you start culturally, holistically going, we need to reestablish a last 10% culture of candor. And then you've kind of reset the bar. And now maybe it becomes an easier concept to do some of the things that Max was just saying around if there are individuals who aren't following in alignment with the culture, at least we've established it. And so I would use this as a point of jumping off and getting back in with them.
Yeah, we just had a good conversation as a staff this past week where we talked about, hey, there was a sense where people, it's like, I want to be encouraged more. And so we had a conversation around remember, we're doing some good things. We want it to be great. And so I actually use that language of what's the last 10% to go from good to great. Now we're going to celebrate what's going on, but we have to be able to be honest about where we can get better. And just exactly what you're saying, Lee, I felt like it kind of helped reset and refocus the vision of where we're going, to be able to get past some of the feelings that started to get hurt, and navigate forward. So that was really helpful for us.
Love it.
Well, an alignment tool that we use in a lot of the SMPs or a lot of the settings with your churches, using an alignment tool around the conversation in conflict only helps because with Max, like if we're saying, hey, the mission is the foundation, are we in alignment with the mission? Here's some things that we can see that aren't in alignment. So that's also a springboard to set that conversation too.
It's that clarity. It's clarity, right, Jeff? So it's that clarity around that. And here's subtly what you guys just got by spending an hour here is hopefully you can just take this and actually go, hey, this is a great tee up for us to have a conversation, right? But our goal is to just resource you in a way that you can go back to your teams and take this and go, let's have a conversation around these 6 guides that's here. Let me click over. Can somebody, it's not going to help you guys. I don't think, obviously you guys can't click on the screen, but I think that there's, let me see if I can drop it in there, but there's actually a framework that I want to give you guys that actually, oh, here we go. Can you guys see that? Yeah. So I'm going to copy the link and actually put it in there for you guys in the chat. Look at me being all techie. This should be a link to somebody hit it and tell me if this will give you a couple things for today. I'll put it in the whole thing. I think I just messaged only Jeremy, but there you go. You guys, somebody click and just nod if you got it. That should give you basically what it is it's basically walking through each of the 6 with 3 or 4 key questions that you can ask and even rank 1 to 10 around like, okay, where are we on a spectrum of 1 to 10 with candor? But it helps you not just to go, what are we doing with candor? It'll actually maybe create some pointed questions that will illuminate our level of candor, commitment, chemistry, etc. Did it work when you guys opened it? Okay, great. Cool. Awesome. All right. Any other conversations around alignment since we only have 18 minutes left? Anybody else want to jump in, ask a question, or provide clarity before I steamroll us through the next topic in 10 minutes? You're like, wow, let's do that. Okay, here we go. We're going to steamroll. We're going to pivot hard. Okay. Oh, let me say one more thing. I'm so sorry. Here's what I want to ask you to do. Look at the gauges of your team. Use the framework that we just dropped in the chat if it's helpful. You can even pass that along to team members that you feel is appropriate. Be careful there. And then here's what I would encourage you guys to do is to think about what is one courageous move or one courageous conversation that I need to have based on where our current gauges of alignment are. That way you're not completely overwhelmed. Just go, what is the lowest gauge of the 6? And what's a courageous move I need to make? I'm not talking about firing people, though it could be, but what is a courageous move or a courageous conversation that I need to have that will set us towards alignment? Because again, you guys are the stewards of that on your team. And so nobody's going to do it if you're not doing it. So I wanted to make sure and say that. I don't want you guys just go, man, we need to get realigned. What is the one move or the one conversation that you need to have that begins the process of realignment? It may be, man, we don't have clarity. Our team doesn't know what our 10 or our 7-year vision is. We don't know. We don't have clarity around our distinct values. Cool. So the courageous thing you need to do is have some kind of a process start where you begin to bring clarity to that and to begin to make that a thing. Cool? I'll note by your silence that it's cool. All right, here we go. This is just brain dump. You're going to download another thing from this call, and I don't want to wait till next month because it'll be too late for you. And so I want to make sure we just skim through this really quickly. Easter prep. You guys know Easter's April 4th and 5th, or April 5th. You guys, if you're not aware, you might want to check your calendars because it's there. I'm sure you're all in different stages of preparation. But I wanted to just give you one different lens, or actually 4 different lenses that you can look through today that would actually use our Growmentum framework of how can we prep for Easter being spiritually led, being led by the Spirit, but also being strategically aware. So it's not just all, here's our workbook on how to make Easter more a better experience. Because here's my concern, guys. Here's our concern for you. What potentially can happen, no matter your scale, Easter is always a raised bar of energy, of people, all of that, no matter your scale. And if we're not careful, we draw huge crowds with zero spiritual impact, right? And so remember when we talked about Christmas and Easter, where Easter kind of sits on our spiritual spectrum, the Easter crowd tends to be a little bit more middled on our spectrum than your Christmas Eve candlelight crowd. So don't forget that as you're prepping, that typically Christmas is a lot of, I just want to come light a candle with grandma. If someone's showing up for Easter, there's probably a lot more, not totally, but a lot more de-churched or unchurched who are showing up for your Easter services. There's something about Easter that tells them they should be there. It's not just the hold the candle because it's Christmas before we go have ham. So keep that in mind and maybe share this with your team as you prepare across the board, because in the room, it's a little different from Christmas to Easter, right? It's a little bit more of an opportunity to potentially reconnect or re-engage somebody who previously has had a relationship with Christ and or has had a relationship with the church, even your church. And so that can impact how we're spiritually led and strategically aware in our prep, in our preparation for that day. So the question I was going to ask you is, how can our Easter not become a rush performance with a frantic posture? And some of you have experienced that the last few years. Oh my gosh, people on site, how do we get them off, get them on, parking, etc., right? So we plan all year for Easter, and then it's like chaos, quick, and people feel that too, right? So instead of it becoming a moment of real spiritual encounter, it simply becomes like, just craziness, right? It's just frantic, and there's not a lot of spiritual impact. So again, that's where the strategically aware, if we're strategically aware, potentially we can lower the level of frantic chaoticness as best as possible, so that by doing that, we can raise the bar of real spiritual impact for our people. We at Growmentum are not Easter haters. So even though you'll have people that'll only come at Easter, Great, they're coming, right? And so let's lean in, right? And let's make sure that it's as powerful as possible for them in the experience that they're going to have. So without intentional leadership on your part in this last few minutes, we'll talk about it, but it can be really impressive, but spiritually thin. So here's what I want to show you. This is just a visual, okay? How can your Easter be led of the Spirit while still being aware of the strategy? These are not in competition, they are collaborative. Let me say that again. They are not in competition. They're collaborative. Some of you have leaned heavily Spirit led, and God is up there going, can you please do something strategic? Because I've told you what I want you to do. Others of you maybe have been very strategic, and you probably could lean a little bit more into what is God actually telling us to do during this season. Okay. And so, hey, you're going to love this. There's always a 2x2, guys. Okay. And so here, this is hot off the presses. Matt Nations is not on here, but here it is. Okay. Boom. All right. We were messing around yesterday, and it actually has some meaning to it. Oh, you can't see it. David's making hand motions. I thought he was putting a heart up for me. All right. There we go. All right. Better. All right. Here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to get out of your way for a second. Layout. I'm just going to go content only. How's that? Better? Great. Okay. So here's how this looks, guys. It's asking the question, spiritually led at the top of the y-axis, spiritually anemic at the bottom. Where are we? Are we being led by the Spirit, or are we just like doing it all ourselves and working really hard? Juxtapositioned against the x-axis of strategically aware on the right. We're strategic. We're doing things purposefully. We're doing things intentionally. And unfortunately, I think it's the right term. We're strategically oblivious. It's the opposite of aware. Like, we're not doing anything strategic at all. We're just hoping people show up, right? And so depending on where you lie in that currently in your planning, we want you to be on the upper right quadrant. We want you, your team, your positioning in your community to be prepared strategically and to have a powerful spiritual experience, right? Where we got a clear plan, we got a clear heart, we're maximizing our alignment, which we just talked about. See what I did there, right? We've really sought God, and we're building the structure to steward the people that are coming to meet with God on that day. That's upper right. That's where we want you guys to be. In the next 8 weeks, we want to be there. Totally leaning on the Spirit, totally strategically aware. Unfortunately, if we lean left or right on the spectrum, we end up in some other areas where potentially it's really slick and strategic, but it's lacking spiritual power and life change. And so it's executed really strong, but there's no spiritual vitality there, and life change doesn't really happen. And maybe they'll come back next year, but God didn't really do anything. Or it's really powerfully spiritually, but we're strategically oblivious, so we don't know what to do with it. It's weak preparation. The parking lot's a train wreck. The kids' area is a mess. The kids have a terrible area. There's no follow-up. There's no next steps. There's no clear communication. Yeah, people had kind of a moment, but that's it. It's a passing moment. Or the worst of all is the lower left, which is there's no strategy, it's predictable, and it's powerless because it's strategically anemic. Nobody on this call is in that lower quadrant. I just put it there as an example, right? So we don't want to be lower left. This is not a tool. This is a conversation tool. Does that make sense, guys? This is something that we want to invite you to go have a conversation with your team and say, okay, let's make sure that what do we need to do to be upper right? Like, if I was leading another Easter meeting in the next week or two, I'd start with this. Where are we, right? And where are we, and what are we doing? And how do we move more upper right, more spiritually aware, or more spiritually led, Spirit-led, and more strategically aware? Cool? And so as you look at that, I want you to think about it in the course of these four boxes that are lenses by which you can look at each of these areas. And this is just an example before we wrap up the call. So 4 key areas of any Easter experience is: what's our invite culture for Easter? How are we engaging volunteers, upping that, making current volunteers top of their game? How are we prepping our environments? And then lastly, how are we prepared for what we're calling an Easter curious crowd? That's speaking back to that spectrum of the people that are going to be there that have a spiritual curiosity. Okay. And so I'm just giving you this framework. We obviously don't have time to unpack it all, but I think it's important for you to be asking these questions around what does this look like for us as a team? I'm going to pause because we only have 8 minutes. Questions or thoughts around that? Five, four. How am I doing, Jeff? 3, 2, 1. Anybody want to offer up a little assessment of their current state of Easter prep based on this? Be candid.
Hey, I just have a question. I'm sorry. Could you go back to the one that has the four?
They're there
the-
now.
No, the four key areas for Easter.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. The 4 lenses, as we're calling them.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. When you talk about environmental prep, are you talking about, to what extent are you talking about like physical things like the building and
Everything.
stuff
Yep.
like that?
Yep. And we're using environment because it's really general, Max. And so
Okay.
it's every environment, right? From what happens on stage, what happens in the room, what happens in the lobby, what happens in your kids' area, what happens in your parking lot, what happens, blah, blah, blah. So
Okay.
it's intentionally wide and generic, right? It's not just what happens in the room. That's where the time in erodes awareness of. So let me walk through that for a second, just because Max brought it up. So if you're spirit led, you're asking the question, how do our environments complement the spiritual movement that we're praying happens? Are there things about our environment that will complement what we're doing in the room? Okay. That's the spirit led question. Then the strategic awareness is let's do an audit over the next few weeks of our experiences. And right now is the time to audit your weekend towards Easter. So as you get into the next few Sundays, don't audit on Wednesdays, audit on Sundays when it's actually happening, and audit it towards the Easter experience because time in erodes awareness of. So that would be an example of how can we be spirit led and strategically aware. The invite culture is a pretty simple one, right? Invite culture, spirit led. We want people to identify individuals in their life. We want to be prayerful over those individuals. We want to provide over the 3 or 4 weeks running up, even moments in our service where we're praying for those invites, right? And then strategically, we want to do some things to put tools digitally and physically in people's hands to provide them with enough information that they can be aggressive in inviting the people that they are in relationship with. So that's, again, another example of how that works. Cool? I know we should have done another half hour on this. There's a lot here. You'll be fine. Nate, you want to add anything to that? Debbie? I just like the 2x2. I think it's cool. It's good coloring too. You like that? It's great. Cool. Last thing, we are going to have another call before Easter, but this is the moment, probably in the next 4 weeks, where you need to be leaning in to anything for Easter, right? And you are, but in another 4 weeks, a lot of things that would be great for us to do, the time has already expired enough for us to clearly execute. So if you haven't had that, the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of churches have now is maybe it's you, depending on the scale of your team, but a lot of churches are literally, I've had 2 of them they have someone on their team they're calling their Easter czar. And basically that person, whether they're at the executive level or not, is sort of responsible to run this play. That the Easter czar is kind of empowered to align the entire team around that and what that looks like. And so that might be something for you guys. Obviously, your whole team's going to be involved, but if it's not you, is there somebody who's really running the play for your Easter experience? Because we're really praying you guys are going to see massive percentage impact, but not just more people in the room that makes us feel good on Monday, but more impact and life change, baptisms, etc. that's going to happen. Cool. You guys are going to get all of this. I'm going to ask Nate to pray us out. And as he's praying us out, before you jump off, I'm going to stick this in the chat. This here, this is a 1-page. I'm going to stick it in the chat for you guys so you can download it really quick or Or maybe you guys got it all. I think you got it all. It was in there. There's something in there called a one page that has a lot of this conversation there. All right. Nate, wrap us up and pray us out, will you?
All right, God, thank you so much, Lord, that you're a strategic God. And so, Father, I pray as we kind of go into our week and finish this week out and prep for Easter, Father, I do pray that you would help us be, Lord, both spiritual and strategic in that preparation. God, I pray that you would lead us through your Spirit and we would be listening. And Lord, that we wouldn't just simply run a play back because it was effective last year. Father, I pray that you would help us be sensitive to your Spirit and that we would be aware of maybe something different that we need to do this year that you're leading us towards. So God, I pray that you'd help us lead boldly. I pray, as Lee talked about earlier in the call, Father, that you would help us align our teams around the vision that you've given us. And so, Father, I thank you for the leaders on this call. I pray that you would equip us, empower us, encourage us to go forward this week. And Father, thank you for Lee and his leadership. We ask all of this in the name of Jesus. Amen.